Today's episode, we tackle Cape York and some of the tracks of Teletrack, Frenchmans Track. We have a look at the Creb track and a few tracks off near Weipa. Stay tuned and you'll see why I can't wait to head back. So after a lot of preparation, which included building and fitting out my canopy that I wanted to, a couple of thousand k's later, we arrived at the start of the Teletrack at Bramwell. We were super excited and couldn't wait to hit the first obstacle. Not too long later, we arrived at Palm Creek. They say Palm Creek is a mini gunshot, and I'll have to agree now. The exit out of Palm Creek was quite wet, but because it was still early in the day, we didn't have too much trouble. Next up, we had a few little water crossings which weren't too much of a trouble. Some of them were Stoneys Creek and South and North Alice Creek before we got to Delahunty River. Sorry, over here?
Yeah.
Delahunty River was the first crossing we had where the water was flowing quite quickly, but because it was shallow, we were lucky it wasn't too hard to cross. But it'd be a different story in a lot higher water. Then we came to the famous gunshot crossing. The main two were out of our league, so we found one just around the corner. As you can see, it's a lot easier. We did that one fairly easily. It was a short ride down the creek to the exit. The exit was a bit sloppy, but the front locker made me look a whole lot better than I was. The last major crossing for the south half of the Teletrack was Cockatoo Creek. As you can see here, it wasn't too deep. There were some boulders, but with some expert guidance from the top friends we just met, we were able to find a smooth, shallow way through, and we were on our way again soon. We camped overnight on the northern banks of the Scrubby Creek, which is just inside the northern half of the Teletrack. The next morning we got up fairly early and headed off to Twin Falls and Elliot Falls, one of the most magical places I've seen. And then soon after we were back on the track doing the northern half of the Teletrack. First up was Canal Creek. After Sand Creek, we had a short drive through easy territory to get to Mistake Creek. For those that haven't done the Teletrack, Mistake Creek is where you can enter and exit the north half of the Teletrack, about halfway along. The entrance into Mistake Creek is fairly steep and easily managed. As you can see, it's a fairly sharp right turn to get to the exit. We elected to go for a 3-point turn, got out, it's very firm at the bottom, so easily achieved. Next we're at Cannibal Creek. It's fairly a steep drop in. It was about bonnet height water, and again a fairly sharp right hand turn, but easily achieved. We followed a 6-wheel through, so he merked it up a little bit. Made the exit a little bit ordinary, so we decided to put some max tracks down in a couple of spots just to make sure we got up in one run. And then we had the infamous Cypress Log Bridge, which lived up to its name. Probably the scariest thing I've ever done while floor driving. But we got through unscathed thanks to some expert spotting.
I'm just gonna leave this always on so I can talk.
You can see from the lady in the background, it's probably just as scary watching it as it is to drive it. Then it was on to Logan's Creek. Fairly long crossing, fairly deep. I think it was just over my bonnet. It wasn't the firmest of bottoms, but a little bit of momentum maintained got us through okay. After we cleared Logan's Creek, we had Nolan's Brook next, which was a fairly decent drive. Probably made worse by the fact I knew Nolan's was next and I was a little bit apprehensive. But on the way, we had a few marsh holes or bog holes to get through, which proved exciting, not too much of a drama. And then it was Nolan's, what I would consider the pinnacle of the Teletrack. When we arrived, there's a little bit of a lineup, which was good. Gave us a chance to calm our nerves and see what others were doing. Check out the different lines. There's probably 5 or 6 different lines. We waded through the one we thought was best, and then put the water bar on, got the snatch trap ready, and waited our turn. Then I lowered myself down when ready. We did put the snatch trap on. I wanted to have a go at driving it first, which in the end was good, but we had a car and a snatch trap ready to go should it have gone pear-shaped. Once we cleared Nolans, we decided we wanted to finish the Teletrack, so we continued up past the exit to the PDR, right up to the south bank of the Jardine River. With the Teletrack over, the next step was to cross the Jardine River and head up to Bamaga, where the next day we headed out and had a look at the sign and the tip. We spent a few days exploring the tip before we headed back to Bramwell and then out to Weipa. We found a track called Stoneys Creek, and it wasn't long before we were bogged to the chassis. Thanks to my winchman, we were out soon after, but only a matter of seconds later, we were bogged again, this time for a fair while. We spent the next 2 to 3 hours with the max tracks and winch, making our way slowly through probably 200 to 300 metres of muddy slop, but we had the time of our lives. Eventually found some more solid ground, so we were able to put the max tracks and the winch away, drive under our own steam for a little bit more, a couple of little obstacles, and then we're back to the main track. And then we made for Weipa, starting to get pretty late in the day. after we left Weipa and on our way home, we decided to have a crack at the Frenchman's Track. We came in from the west, knowing that we probably wouldn't be able to finish the track, but we thought we'd have a go anyway. You can see here we're coming down the entrance to the Wenlock River from the western side. It's fairly slippery. The actual river itself was probably just on bonnet height. We walked it first quickly, being careful of crocs, and we had a quick drive over. It wasn't too much for trouble. There wasn't any boulders or anything in the Wenlock. The exit out was fairly steep. It's all clayey, as you can see, but fairly smooth and not too much trouble. It took us about 2 hours to drive between the Wenlock and the Pascoe Rivers. As you can see, most of it's quite smooth and easy, but there were some rocky, hilly areas. Unfortunately, we couldn't cross the Pascoe. It was way too deep and fast flowing, so we had to turn around and back out. Once we'd safely cleared the Wenlock for the second time, this time from the east to the west, we got a little bit cocky heading one of the marsh holes and we got bogged. Luckily though, my little fella could run the winch out quickly and we were soon on our way. Once we cleared the Frenchmans Track, we headed back down and then up Portland Road, stayed overnight at a creek crossing there, and then headed into Chili Beach, where my son found a couple of coconuts. I had a great time cracking them open. Then, of course, he did his best to make a coconut bikini. The last track we wanted to hit before we got home was the Creb track, but as you can see here, it was too wet and it was closed. It stayed closed for about 2 weeks after we left, unfortunately, but we'll be back. But we still drove the Teletrack and we got the souvenir. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.